Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our event today. Let me share my screen. Sorry, I should have done that from the beginning. I always think I know exactly what I'm doing, but it's always too many different screen sharing apps. So I want to welcome you today to our webinar, Increase Productivity Through Sage 300 Process Automation, Collaboration, Business Intelligence, and more. Need to choose the right screen. Let me see here. There we go. Let me start the slideshow. There we go. So thank you for the patience here. So today, as I said, our session is going to be increased productivity through Sage 300 process automation, collaboration, business intelligence, and more. So it's a mouthful. There's a lot of stuff to go over. I won't take too much time. I want to welcome our presenters today, Robert Lavery, Nancy Lavery, and Scott Belageron from Robert Lavery & Associates, or RLA. Sorry, Scott, got a bit of typo in your name there. We're going to go through a brief overview and a demo of the various solutions that Rob and his team represent and support to us for the Sage 300 community, and how they can help increase productivity throughout your Sage 300 system. And then at the end, please put any questions in the questions, and if you have any chats, questions you can put there. I'll be monitoring that. I am recording this, so everybody's on mute, and we will be sharing the recording after. And at the end, I'll probably answer questions at the very end, unless it makes sense to do it in the middle of the demonstration. So without any further ado, Nancy, I think you're going to start, so I'm going to make you the presenter. Is that all right?
Thanks very much, Will.
There you go.
Everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Great, thanks very much, Will. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedules to spend with us today. I'm going to start by showing you a document management solution, and then I will pass it over to Scott that's going to show you a product that's going to give you the ability to add some workflow capability into Sage 300, and then we'll wrap it up with some reporting. So with Document Management Link, it gives you the ability to view documents inside Sage 300. So I'm going to start today around the AP invoice entry screen, because AP invoices seems to be a popular place where people want to be storing and viewing documents. But just to be aware that Document Management Link will work throughout Sage 300. So you can view documents against any screen in Sage 300. So I'm going to be showing an example around the vendor number, but the same concept would hold true for customer number, for invoice, item number, order number, purchase order number. You get the idea. We're linking documents to a field on the screen, in this case the vendor number, and then based on the value in that field, it knows which folder to look at. So I'm storing documents in network folders. So these documents are stored outside of Sage 300. And so we're not consuming any database space. So on my C drive, I created a folder that I called Orchid, and then I have a document folder. And then I have different subfolders for the different types of documents that I'm storing. This folder hierarchy would be completely up to you and really dependent on how you want to be viewing documents in Sage 300. But for today, we're going to focus on AP documents, and then I have folders for each of my vendors. So my vendor 1200, for example, has these 4 documents in it, and that's what we're seeing here in the Document Management Link window. If that value were to change to 1400, then I'll be viewing the documents that I have stored around my vendor 1400. Now, it is sophisticated enough that once you get your folder hierarchy in place, it can start to build out for you automatically. So if I were to add an entry here for a vendor that didn't have a folder, and we can actually see the folder list here of the folders I currently have. So let's just pick, we'll pick 9230 as an example. You'll notice the box will dynamically change to now display the documents I have stored for my vendor number 9230. But I didn't have a folder and I don't have any documents stored. So if I want to link a document to my vendor 9230, then I can just hover over the document management link window and click the add button, go out anywhere in my environment, click on a document and drag it and drop it into the document management link window. And what it's done in this case is it's taken a copy of that document from my suspense folder and it's dropped it into the vendor number folder for 9230. But I didn't have one yet, so the system actually created that folder for me and then filed the document. So, once you have the structure in place, it will build out for you automatically. Now, if we go back to our original entry here, the second window, what I've done is you can do a configuration around 2 fields. So in this instance, I want to store my AP invoice entry related documents against my vendor, but I want to easily be able to see the documents that relate to one particular entry. So I've done a configuration around the vendor number and the document number. So any documents that I drag into this window will be stored under the vendor, but I'm going to filter the contents of that folder based on the document number so that I can just see those documents that relate specifically to this entry. So, typically these documents would be added when you're entering this AP invoice in Sage. So again, I can add a document, go out and find that document and drag it and drop it into the document management link window. But you'll notice in this instance, it renamed the document for me. So that's an optional configuration where I specified I want to be able to rename the document and I want to use the value in the document number field in order to do that. So that's why it changed it based on the document number January 16. You can link as many documents as you like here. If I were to grab another Excel document and drag it in, it's going to try to rename it and tell me that I already have an Excel file that's named January 16. So did I make a mistake and I want to overwrite the document that's there? Or you could put a date parameter, or you could put a -1. So -1, -2, and so on. So you can store as many documents as you like. Now, in this instance, I want to view only those documents against this particular screen. But in other cases, you may want to be able to view documents against multiple screens. So what I've done in this third box is I've done a configuration around the purchase order number. And these documents would have been attached when I did the purchase order entry. But I've configured the software to specify when the purchase order number appears on a screen. So it's appearing here on the AP invoice entry screen. I want to be able to see those documents. So I'm storing the documents once, but I'm able to view those documents against multiple screens in Sage 300 based on my configuration. So you can link documents to any field on any screen in any module of Sage 300, and that would include third-party products. So for example, EFT processing, that's installed inside my environment. I could view documents against the EFT processing screens. So for example, you're going to set up vendors within EFT, and maybe you want to attach a copy of the specification from the bank. So you can link documents to those screens as well. And that would include the entry grid screens. So down here, I've got a configuration around my GL account, and that's just illustrating that you can store documents around the entry grid fields as well. Now you may notice this bright green box. That is another product, which is a notes product. And it works similarly to Document Management Link in that you can store a note against any field in Sage 300. You can color code notes. So in this case, my shipping note is a green note. I could have admin notes that show up as pink. It just makes it easier for users to identify a note based on the color alone, whether it's something that they need to have a look at. And you can choose which notes a user sees, whether they can add a new note or edit an existing note or even delete a note. And that's all based on the configuration. So I've shown you everything relating to network folders. Just so you're aware, you can store documents in SharePoint and it will work the same way. Or you could use something like Dropbox or Google Docs or even OneDrive to store documents and view them within Sage 300. So that's a very quick overview of the document management link solution. I have the question box flashing here, so I don't know, Will, maybe you can tell me, is that a question for me or not? No? Okay, so I guess we'll do questions at the end, Will, or did you
I'm
want to
just checking
pause here to
it.
answer any questions?
No, it's okay. That might have just been my note to tell people to put questions in. I don't see any questions at the moment.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So with that, then I will pass it over to Scott. You will see document management link throughout Scott's presentation as well. And if you have any questions, I'll be here until the end of the session today. So I'm happy to answer any questions related to document management link.
Okay, that's awesome. Scott, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Will.
There you go.
Okay, so can everybody see?
Yep, looks good.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to show you is Orchid's Extender product. So what Extender does is allows you to create workflows around processes in Sage. It gives you audit logging capabilities. It allows you to send email notifications and basically customize your Sage 300 environment in a number of different ways. So I'm going to start off with the workflow capabilities. And what I'm actually going to show you is this integration that we've done. So Extender has its own standard workflow capabilities, but it also has what we call the remote action service. And what that does is allow you to reach out outside of Sage to do your approvals. So we've integrated it with the Adobe Sign platform. So the first one I'm going to show you is actually based around invoice batches. So I'm going to create a new invoice batch. I apologize in advance for my system moving quite slowly today, but we'll power through. So I'm just create a test batch. I think I'm on 317 now. Test batch 317, enter my vendor. And then I'll just put in one entry here, add it with a document number, add it. So now I've got my batch created in the AP invoice batch list. And the way workflows work is that the workflow is triggered by an event in Sage. So for most cases with batches, it's the act of setting that batch ready to post. So when I double click the ready to post, set it to yes, you see it's working in the background and the Extender workflow is actually being triggered right now. So in a second, you will get a pop-up screen saying that the batch has been submitted for approval. And then the approver will receive an email. So in this case, the email will come from Adobe Sign because we're now integrating with Adobe Sign and they're going to handle the emailing moving forward for this one. So approval required to set batch ready to post. Approvers have been notified and we set the batch back to open. So now the batch is still sitting there. If they were to try to submit it again, it would just tell them that it's a workflow already exists. So if I close my AP invoice batch screen, I would have received an email. If I just refresh that, yeah. So I would have, as the approver, I would just receive this email here. My configuration, I am also the person sending the email, so it would notify them as well. So all the approver has to do, log into their email, they'll get that email from Adobe Sign and they open it up and just click review and sign. So what we've done is create like a PDF version of that AP invoice batch list. So when they open it up, that's exactly what they'll see. All of the information that they may need in order to review and approve the batch. And then just like any other e-signing application, you scroll to the bottom and that gives you that particular place to sign. I'll just say Scott. Once I apply, I can then click to sign and complete that process. So now that approval is all set. In this AP invoice batch workflow, I've got 2 levels of approval, as you saw 2 signature spots there. So without going back into Sage at all, Adobe Sign is going to take care of the next emailing to go to the next approver. So I've got another email here now too. Same deal as the first, but it would be to the second approver. They just go into their email. They would click review and sign. The exact same PDF document will come up. They've got all the information they would need to review and approve the AP invoice batch. See the first signature is there as well. And let's just say yes this time. So apply, click to sign, and then you're all set. So at this point, the user would go back into Sage and generally, so I mentioned the remote action service, so that's what's allowing us to reach outside of Sage to get these approvals. What remote action does is has this poller, and what the poller does is actually reach out to the outside world and pull those approvals back into Sage. Generally, we actually have another Orchid product called Process Scheduler that allows you to schedule certain processes to happen at certain times. And that would actually come with the remote action service, level 1 of the Process Scheduler, and would likely run your poller for you, so you wouldn't have to do this part manually. You could have it run at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, throughout the day, whatever you require. But when the poller is run, I'll give it a second, it'll reach out to Adobe Sign and verify that those approvals have, or that document has been signed. And you'll see it's automatically posting the batch. And then it'll notify me that one approval has been brought back in. And at this point, the person who submitted the batch for posting would also receive an email notifying them that it has been posted. Just said, there we go, one approval applied successfully. And I'm gonna get that, which means nothing. So now if we go back into my AP invoice batch list, we'll see that batch that I just created, test batch 317, has now been posted. And I mentioned audit logging capabilities in Extender as well. So it has its own audit logging capabilities, but we've also, since we've integrated with Adobe Sign, we've pulled in their own audit trail. So I've used what Nancy showed you in the last little bit, the document management link solution, to actually display those, the audit trail that we've downloaded straight from Adobe, so that end users can come in, and if they're looking at that invoice batch, make that smaller, they can see the entire audit trail there. And then they also have the ability to look at the actual signed PDF for that AP invoice batch. There we go. So if I scroll down to the bottom, we're using like a demo service for this Adobe Sign, so you will not normally have this here. But yes, they can go down, take a look, and see that it's now been signed. So that's one version of like Adobe Assign integration that we've done. There's another one that we've done as well, and that's around order entry. So what we've done is with the Adobe Sign, so when you create a quote in order entry, we've configured it so that to get the approval from the customer, it'll actually send that Adobe Sign document to the customer to approve the quote. And then when that approval is brought back in, we actually automatically create the order for you. So I'm just going to quickly create a quote here. just for the one item. I'll say we get 10 of them. And I post that. So once again, you see it's working in the background and the extender workflow is being triggered by the active me clicking post this time. And if we get enough time, we'll once again be notified by the workflow that the approval has been submitted and sent to the customer. So quote will be promoted once signed off by the customer. So if I close that, I can go back into my email and I would have received another one, this approved quote. It's the exact same process. So I'm just going to go in. This one only requires one approval, one signature. So I'll just go in, so the customer can review whatever they need to review in terms of approving the quote. This can also be, so this is pulling the report from Sage. So if you had a custom report, you would display whatever you have it displaying yourselves. So I will apply the signature again. Now we're all set. And then I will go back and to my remote action and run the poller again. And taking its sweet time.
Yeah, I know you're running the poller manually for this
Yeah.
demonstration, but in a normal situation, we'd use the process scheduler to do this for our clients, right?
Absolutely. We've packaged it now with remote action. So they'll get process scheduler level 1 with the remote action service. Yeah, so we would set that to run at whenever you need it to run, really, so that you wouldn't have to do this process manually.
Right. You can have it run every 5 minutes or whatever you want.
Exactly, whatever you need.
Twice a day, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
So there we go. We've got our approval. So now if we go back and let's find the newest order, because that order would have been created now that we brought the approval in. So we'll just find the most recent one we've got, which is this one that was just created. And you can go back and take a look. It's created from that quote that we had just posted. You could also, I don't have it set up here. You see the DML window empty over there, but you could pull that that PDF copy or the signed copy of that quote in with the order as well. So you can link those and view the documents against that order. So the last bit of approval I'm going to show you is actually not integrated with Adobe Sign anymore. We're going back to straight standard extender workflow. So I'm going to close my Adobe Sign company here and open up another one. So this one's based around, so you can set a workflow around, you can have purchase orders, you can have an order entry, you can have it in invoices, but you can also do it around different fields in Sage. So you can, so in this case, I'm going to show you, I'm going to change a customer's credit limit in AR. And I'll just go, let's say a customer 1100. So they're 50,000. Let's change that to 25,000. And as soon as I click save, it's the same thing. So that's the action that's kicking off the extender workflow this time. See it processing. And then it's going to notify me that the change to the customer's credit limit does require an approval. So the workflow has started, and at this point, it has also sent a general extender email to my email as the approver, notifying me that this change requires approval. So now it's outside of Adobe Sign. We're just doing standard extender approval workflows now. So, and the emails are customizable. You can put a number of different variables in there. I've just got a fairly standard one here, notifying them that they want to change it from 50,000 to 25,000. And to do this approval, This one is actually inside of Sage. So all approvers will be licensed with a workflow user license, and they would have access to this workflow portion here. So that's where the workflow console is stored. Normally, I wouldn't be able to just go and approve my own workflows, but as the admin, I can do whatever I want. So now you can see I've got the customer credit limit approval here in my workflow console. From here, you have the ability to drill down to the AR customer, customer activity, all of the different stuff that you may need in order to review, to approve. So if I open that up, it just takes me back to that customer. And if I'm okay with everything, or so I could also reassign too. I can reassign the approval to another user as long as they're licensed with the workflow user license. But as long as I'm happy with this, I can click approve. As the approver for this one in particular, I've set it so that I have the option to adjust the approval credit limit if, say, I wanted to make it 20,000 instead. And then I can also leave a comment for the person who initiated that workflow, but we'll just say it's okay. So once I've completed that, the workflow will complete. This instance should be removed from your workflow console. That's also optional if you wanted to keep them in there, and you could change, the color would change for approved. You can keep them in there as well, and then just manually clean that up as you go. I have it set to be deleted automatically. So now if I go back into my AR customer screen, and I go back to my customer 1100, you'll see that it's now been changed from 50 to 20,000 because that was what the approver decided they wanted it to be. And then I've also got what Nancy pointed out is Orchid Notes as well working on the side here. So I've linked Orchid Notes with this screen and also the extender logging capabilities. So now you've got this next to the screen telling you the credit limit was changed from 50,000 to 20,000, who it was done by, and then when it was done. So if you want to be able to review those certain things from inside of this screen, you can also set up a note to do that stuff as well. And what that is getting that from is we have the extender inquiries in the log here. So I've got it configured to log all of the changes in that AR customer screen. So we've changed the credit limit from 50,000 to 20,000 here. You can also, if the email there changes, when it was last maintained, that would also change as well. You can also log when users are logging in and out of Sage. So pretty much any field in any view in Sage, you could monitor and have logging capabilities for that, as well as inserting and deleting records as well. So the last bit I wanted to show you is the sort of customizable portion of Extender. So with Extender, we're using Python scripting you could add fields to screens in Sage, you could create custom tables, you could add buttons to screens that automate processes for you. And the one that I'm gonna show you, if I just get out of this one as well, and my other company. So what we've got in purchase order entry here is we've added a couple buttons actually to the screen. One for print to PDF. So what that's just going to do is PDF the purchase order that you're in and save it somewhere so that you can view it with document management link here. Or we have the print/email PDF. So what that does is same thing as the print to PDF. It'll PDF the PO, save it somewhere, but then the email portion, it'll also email it to the vendor or somebody of your choosing. So if I just go to a purchase order and I click that button, it's going to automatically create that PDF, store it somewhere so I can view it here, and then it's going to email it to the vendor. There we go, printed to, so it's saved in that location. And then it's going to send an email. So PO confirmation email to vendor at address, same address as me. So now I've received this email as the vendor telling me find attached your purchase order confirmation. And then they also have a PDF copy of that purchase order as well. And we also have this done, the exact same thing done in order entry with order confirmations too. So just to give you a little example of the kinds of things we can do to sort of automate your business processes and customize Sage to what your needs are. So that is it for me. I think I'll hand it over to Rob now to finish us off. And yes, I guess we'll do any questions you have at the end as well.
Yeah, I will put the questions at the end. Rob, let me make you the presenter here. Give me 1 second. There we go. You want to share your screen, Rob?
All right. Thank you very much, Will, and thank you,
I
Scott.
see your screen. It looks good.
Okay. So Scott mentioned the use of Process Scheduler to automate the polling for activities that you're using in Remote Action Service with the extender, typically for acknowledgements and workflow approvals. And Process Scheduler Level 1 gives you the ability to schedule standard processes within Sage 300. And it actually has up to 3 different levels depending on the functions within Sage 300 that you'd like to schedule. At the basic level, level 1, you can run the poller, and you can do things like data integrity checks and make sure that you've got available disk space on the hard drive and on the server. But then as you move up into the different levels of Process Scheduler, you can do things like running Crystal reports, running FR financial reports, or refreshing Info Explorer cubes. And this is where we want to integrate Process Scheduler to our reporting and analytics processes within Sage 300. So if we look at something like running Crystal reports, that's also part of Process Scheduler Level 1. And it links in with another product we call Report Runner. And with Report Runner, what we're able to do is create a custom menu of Crystal reports or custom Crystal reports from your Sage 300 modules. And with this Report Runner tool, we're able to minimize the amount of data entry that's required to generate the report. So for example, when you look at a vendor aging report, there are a number of different fields that need to be populated in order for you to be able to run the report, because you have to enter things like a date range, vendor number, or vendor group, and other parameters. Well, what you can do with Report Runner is actually hard code the parameters for the reports that you want to run on a regular basis. We've known some clients that might run a vendor aging every day, or in some cases every week. And the people who need to run the report are going in and entering the same parameters every time they run the report. So by using Report Runner, you can hard code those parameters. And as you can see here, rather than going through the entire screen and entering all those parameters, you enter the vendor group that you would like. And then you can go ahead and print the report based on the vendor group entry, because it already knows all the other information. You've hard coded that information with the report template. But then when we link it to Process Scheduler, we can actually schedule this report to run on a certain time at a certain day, maybe a different day of the week, or set it up as a weekly process or a monthly process. And then rather than producing a hard copy of the report, we can email it as a PDF, which Scott just showed you doing for things like PO or OE confirmations using Extender. Well, we can do the same thing using standard email functionality within Sage 300, but now we're automating both the generation of your reports as well as the distribution of those reports. And as you can see, you could email it or generate it as a PDF, an Excel XLS, or a rich text format. And then because we're sending it via email, you can create your own message email template and assign that to the report group, and also then attach all the email addresses for the people that you wish to send that report package to. So whether it's Crystal reports or FR financial statements, you can automate both the generation and distribution of these reports and either attach them to emails, or you can publish them and put them into a particular folder on your network that might be assigned by username. And then all the user has to do is go in and access their folder, and they'll be able to see all of the reports that you've generated for them. And you've also now got an audit trail saying when these reports were distributed. So nobody has the excuse of not receiving the information, because you'll be able to verify when the reports were sent. And so in addition to the Crystal reports, you can also do that for your financial FR reports. And so if you're running departmentalized balance sheets and income statements, you can generate those separately by individual reports. And you choose, again, which segment, if you've segmented your GL, represents which department or which region division. And then you're able to create separate reports that you send off to the division managers as a package, and then maybe a final report with a consolidated series of reports that you want to issue to them. So the combination of the report runner with process scheduler helps you to automate that process within Sage 300. Now, I mentioned there are other processes that you can schedule, such as running day end. So for those of you running the operations suite, you can run your day end and then go ahead and post the batches that are created by the system day end. And then off of that, you're able to go ahead and update information right up to the general ledger. And notice that you can do this across companies as well. So if you're running day end in multiple companies or running reports across multiple companies, you can automate this process entirely for your entire Sage 300 system. And as there's an audit log within Extender, we've also created an audit log within Process Scheduler. So you can tell the system to record the date and time when the process was run. If there were any errors, create a log and show that log detail. You can also send an email as an alert if you find errors, or you could run it every time you process your day end. So that's running Process Scheduler and Report Runner. Now, I don't know if you noticed, I mentioned just very briefly that there's also the ability to create a process around Info Explorer cubes. Now, what are Info Explorer cubes? That's the ability for you to create your own dashboards. So now we're talking about analytics and business intelligence. With Sage 300, standard Crystal reports, and even FR financial statements, the limitation you have is that they're two-dimensional static reports. So when we're looking at an income statement as an example, I'm always stuck with a two-dimensional view based on the information that I'm generating the report for. What we want to be able to do using Info Explorer is we want to extract the data out of Sage 300 and put it into a cube file. So these views that you're seeing on the screen in Info Explorer are actually cube files that are integrated to Sage 300 if you want, but we're extracting the data outside of Sage 300, so we're not limited by the format of the data within an accounting system. We now have the ability to analyze the data on a dimensional basis, and we can format, filter, and add formulas to the data. So if we take a simple example of our AP aging or outstanding transactions, you may see all of the invoice detail, which you can get from a trial balance or running the AP invoice transactions report within Sage 300. But the problem is you may have one user that wants to see all the detail by invoice, but another user that wants to see the information at a summarized level. So let's say instead of individual vendor, they want to see it by vendor group. To do that, you simply drag the vendor group and then collapse the rows and columns, and you can see the information now summarized as a total by vendor group. So that might be someone at a higher level within the organization. But then if you want to explode that, you can see individual vendors within that vendor group and the detail for each of those vendors. So just by collapsing rows, we go from very detailed information at a document level to a summarized level at vendor group. Now, someone else might come along and say, I want to see the same information at a vendor level, not vendor group, but I want to filter out the small invoice details because I'm not interested in the small amounts. I want to have a better sense of our cash flow requirements based on higher dollar invoices we have to pay. So in addition to formatting, we can filter the data. By filtering, what we're able to do is either deselect different vendors and just remove those vendors from the view. So that's a very rudimentary filtering technique. But another more sophisticated is what we call pre-filter. So with pre-filter, we can go in and use any of the dimensions, such as amount due, and you can see all the dimensions in the cube are available. But if I took amount due and I say I only want to see invoices with an amount due that are greater than or equal to, and you pick a value, let's say $500, and I click OK, it now filters the information within the cube for me. So I'm only looking at AP vendor invoices outstanding greater than $500, and you can see the amount due is greater than 500. And then if I like this view, rather than having to go in and filter all the time, I can right click and I can copy the view, and now have a copy of the AP outstanding, and then right click again to rename it, say this is actually my AP outstanding greater than 500. And now I've saved a copy of that filtered view. And when I go back up to my AP outstanding, I want to remove that filter to take me back to the original view showing all the outstanding invoices in AP. So that's formatting and filtering within Info Explorer. If I come over here to order entry and we look at sales by item, you're seeing a sales rank. Sales rank is tied to formulas where I can edit fields, and I can use different formulas such as percent, margin percent, sales rank. These are all different types of transactions that I can use against any of the information that I've stored in the system. And then I can also include styles, which will color code different number ranges where I can attach rules to the different number ranges to highlight anomalies within the data. So as an example, I'm looking at sales with a sales rank, and then I want to include margin percentage. And when I do that, you can see we've color coded the different margin percentages to highlight things that are green that are acceptable, whereas orange is normal and red is unacceptable. So this is what they call a stoplight system that's used in business intelligence tools to highlight data that needs further analysis or inquiry. But now the other thing that's important about these formulas in the analytical tool called Info Explorer, it's based on OLAP, or online analytical processing. And what that means is that as I look at the data and change the perspective of it, these calculations get redone based on the perspective of the data that I'm looking at. And here again, the power of using an Info Explorer cube versus a standard Crystal two-dimensional static report would be that if I wanted to include sales information within the cube, then what I would do is grab information about customer, because this will show me the customers that have bought that item versus the sales of the item. And so you notice that as soon as I introduce customer, the ranking is changed to show me the ranking for sales items by customer. So I've got a #1 item for this customer and a #1 item for this customer, #1 item for this customer. So it automatically redid the sales rank calculation because now I've introduced customer information into the sales cube. And what this is also showing now is the margin that I make on sales of this item to that customer. So you can see for the fluorescent desk lamp, I make 51, almost 52% when I sell. But when I sell to Bargain Mart, but when I sell to the other location of Bargain Mart, I actually make 71% for the same item. So that customer is a more profitable customer for the same item. So you can see the power of being able to view the information in this kind of environment where I'm analyzing information that's being pulled from Sage 300 and I can refresh it at any point in time, but it's giving me the power to view the information in an analytical format. But now the next question comes is, this is analyzing item sales by customer. What if somebody wants to see customer sales by item? How would I do that? Well, if you're working in a spreadsheet, you need to cut and paste rows and columns to reformat the data. If I'm working in Crystal, I need a separate Crystal report to show that. But when I'm in an OLAP data cube, I simply rotate these dimensions. And now I'm looking at customer sales by item. The ranking shows me the #1 customer for that item and the margin for that customer. So it's very simple and very easy to use a tool like this to be able to analyze your data quickly and easily. The other benefit is that I'm not adding information into the cube. I'm always pulling it from Sage 300. So you know you can trust the data, unlike spreadsheets where people can go in and start modifying the data. And depending on how they're modifying the data, it might be losing some integrity. And you want to be able to trust the information. So by forcing people to pull information into the cube and then just massage that data through formulas, you know that you've got a trusted source for the information. But then that leads to an analysis of budget. If I want to create budget information, I can certainly pull budget from Sage 300 budget fiscal sets and do analysis by variance dollars, variance percent. And again, I can rotate these axes. I can change the number of years that we're looking at. I can introduce period information. So if I wanted to analyze fiscal year and period, I would add the period. But then if I wanted to compare the period in one year to period in another year, I would rotate the axes, and now I'm seeing period 1 2020, period 1 2019, and I can do my comparisons month to month. But if I wanted to actually create budgets rather than pulling budget information in from Sage 300, this is where I could create a work set. And the work set allows me to open up the cube and treat it like a spreadsheet where I can modify the budget details and then write it back into the GL of Sage 300. And then if I want to do below budget budgeting, or below GL budgeting rather, at a customer item level, I could create my optional tables in Sage 300 to budget below GL and write that back into Sage 300. So Info Explorer becomes a very powerful tool for you being able to generate budget information at a GL level or a below GL level. And you can either do top-down budgeting, which is starting at a high level and working down into the detail, or we can integrate with Excel and you can distribute departmentalized budgets as an Excel sheet, enter the budget details, capture that as a consolidated total and upload that into Info Explorer for analysis. So we can do detailed or summary budgets depending on what your requirements are. So that summarizes Info Explorer, Process Scheduler, and the Report Runner. And just a note again that Info Explorer is a separate Windows application that's outside of Sage 300, so you don't need to be a Sage user consuming a Sage LAN pack to access this information. We're extracting the data again from Sage 300 and being able to view that information from within the cube. So lastly, we wanted to give you a quick update on EFT, which is the #1 selling product from Orchid, and the advancement into the web screens. So before I do that, I just wanted to highlight the fact that we've added some additional security features with EFT. And so what you see when you're setting up your banks now is not just a file output destination, but also an SFTP, which is secure file transfer protocol, where you can attach passwords. And when you generate the file, rather than having to take a second step to upload the file to the bank's website, you can actually automatically upload the file when you generate it, because you've got a user ID and password that's attached to the bank file, and you can set it up to a secure file transfer protocol with either a password, or some banks will use a key file that you use to validate and authenticate who you are, and then you can upload the file to their bank. So I just wanted to touch on that very quickly to give you an update on some of the additional security we've added to EFT. But lastly, let's take a look at some of the web screens, because Orchid is developing web screens for all their applications. The first one that's been released is EFT. So these are the standard Sage 300 web screens. So you can now access this through a browser on an intranet or externally through browser access if you have VPN connections into Sage 300. So EFT processing will appear on the Sage 300 web screen menus, and a number of the standard setup options for EFT options. EFT Banks, I just showed you the Windows-based classic desktop with EFT Banks. This is what the web screen looks like. And then for EFT customers, EFT vendors, the create EFT file, which is where we generate the EFT file, the print advices, where I can send the remittance advices with attachments to my vendors, and then the standard web screen interface for transaction reports. All right. So that ends the formal part of our presentation. We've covered a lot of ground in a very short space of time, but we appreciate you hanging on for the ride here today. So we'll open up the floor now for questions, Will, if you've got any in the chat.
All right, let me just check here. I do have a couple of questions. Let me just, I'll paraphrase here. So, Rob, give me 1 second here. So can you explain the differences between the extender editions was one question, Rob?
Sure. So at the entry level, we have what we call the Extender Customizer Edition. And Scott was showing you things like approval workflows and the event types for things like email alerts, audit logging. Those are things that allow you to create some additional functionality at a very low cost. It's $1,600 on a perpetual license. And this allows you to create audit logs, do email alerts, create ORCID notes, or set up workflows within Sage 300 using the workflow users that Scott referred to. And that's all part of what we call Customizer. When he talked about the Python scripts and the ability to add buttons to screens or automate processes like emailing confirmations and attaching PDFs using Document Management Link, that was the developer edition. That also includes the ability to add custom tables so you can store additional information within the Sage 300 database, and it will appear as a standard Sage 300 database table. So those are the main differences.
Okay. Let me see here. Just gonna, it's having a little bit of an issue here. Let me stop sharing my screen for a sec. I shared it and then I couldn't go back over there. What are the options? Oh, lost again. What are the options for starting documents in DML?
Oh, okay. Storing documents. Nancy?
Storing. Yeah.
Right, the options. So I was showing you storing documents in network folders. So
Right.
you can use network folders in your environment, or you could use SharePoint. So anyone that's got Microsoft Server, you do get a free version of SharePoint. So you could store documents in SharePoint, or you could use Dropbox, Google Docs, or OneDrive if you wanted to use a cloud-based.
Excellent. Okay. And what are the, I'll call it release cadence for various web screens from ORCID, Rob? You mentioned
Okay.
EFT, but
Yeah, so we have EFT released now, and
Yep.
document management link and notes are being worked on as we speak. I believe they will be the next ones released. RMA is also in development because that's OEM'd by Sage. Some of you might see RMA on the Sage price list. That's actually the ORCID RMA. And then Extender, being able to use Extender in the web. And then products like inter-entity transactions and process scheduler that we talked about today, they don't have specific web screens for configuration, but they do run with the web screens because they're operating at what we call the view level or the business logic level. So you can use inter-entity to create the intercompany transactions in the web version of Sage 300. It just means that you're not actually configuring inter-entity through web screens. And that's the same for things like process scheduler and even Extender. You could create Extender workflows in the web screens of Sage 300 because they're working below the screen level and the business logic level.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe just mention what RMA is, Rob. I don't...
Return material authorizations.
Right.
So the ability for you to be able to issue return authorizations to your customers who want to return goods, and then create credit notes or issue return documents.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't specifically get into that, but it's another feature that,
Yes.
like Rob said, Orchid created its OEM through Sage, but for people that have that need, it's kind of specific, but it's very useful. So if anybody has any questions from that or any of the other products or processes you saw today, please reach out. Just send an email to sales@da.ca, and Mike and I will get back to you because we're familiar with all of these. And I want to thank Scott and Nancy and Rob for their time today. It's always great to get an overview of how the components can work together to kind of solve issues, because sometimes we get so focused on a specific thing, you don't always step back and say, how can I use these components, maybe more than one, to help me not only do something easier, but make it easier for everybody through multiple business processes. So I think that was very good to show. Let me just one more check. No more questions here. So I think we'll give you about 1 minute back. I thank everybody for hanging on. We will send out an email probably tomorrow with the recording of the session. And as I said, if anybody has any questions here, just send it to sales@da.ca. We'll get back to you. So thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Will. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day.
All right. We'll see you later. Thanks.